I need to start out with a caveat. I do not like Mother's Day.
Good.
I don't like what it's become. I don't like that we spend 3 times more on flowers than we did last week, or we go to a brunch that's overcrowded and overpriced, or we're forced to buy a Hallmark card for $5. So it has nothing to do with my childhood or anything. I was very loved, but I want that put out there for you. When Norm called me from his hospital bed on Friday, like Abby, and asked me to do this, I said I would because, well, he was in his hospital bed, so how am I going to say no? But also, I thought, I've been a mom for 21 years. How hard can it be? I can come up and talk about motherhood. And this weekend, as I started thinking about what I would say to everybody, it was impossible to do that without thinking of my mother. And that's when emotions start to take over a little bit. And I understand how hard it was for the other 3 people he asked to not do this. And when I think of my mom, I obviously could not but think of her mom. And I'm a genealogist, so the path backward is very natural for me. So I'd like to start by sharing you some stories about my mom and my grandmother. My meme, who was French-Canadian, lost her mother at 6 years old. Her dad put her and her 3 brothers in a Catholic orphanage run by French-speaking nuns, which was the language they spoke in their home. It was very strict. It was obviously shaped her as a person, and when she became a mother, obviously she brought those experiences, as we all do, that make us the people we are today. So at 6 years old, she went to the orphanage, and she saw her brothers only once a day in the playground through a fence, because back then, boys and girls were separated, especially in these Catholic orphanages. Not only was the studying strict, it was in this order: Catholic studies and religion, prayer, cleaning and work at the orphanage, and then your schoolwork. So she saw her dad once a week on Sundays when he came for Mass, and a short visit. And I think what a sad childhood that must have been, because not only did she not have a mom, she basically didn't really have a family. And when by the way, when I looked this up as a genealogist, I went to the 1920 census, and all of the children in the orphanage were categorized as inmates. And it broke my heart. And when she was 16, which was the age that they release you because you can work, my grandmother went to work. She did not go back to school. She did not have a high school degree or diploma. And she continued to work until she retired, which was very unusual in the 1940s and 50s. She had children and a husband, but she worked all the time. I also often thought, why didn't this, if it were me, I think it would have questioned perhaps God, my faith, my religion, but it did not. She remained a devout Catholic her entire life, very strongly. It did affect how she became a mom. She didn't know how to become a mother because she didn't have that experience. And in turn, she was very strict with my mother. My mother went to school and came home and cleaned the house and cooked dinner for her family of 1 brother and her mom and dad since the age of 8, and did laundry. So my grandmother kind of brought that over into her own parenting style. And it was tough for my mom, but my mom, being a product of the 50s and a little rebellious at 16, started to question this setup in religion and the Catholic Church, and decided not to go anymore, even though she had had all of the sacraments and went to parochial school her whole life. And then she met my dad, and she really went to the dark side and became a Protestant when they got married. And this was huge in my mother's family. And I was raised as a Protestant. And unlike her mother, when my mom became a mother, she chose to do things very much the opposite way that my grandmother did. And I want to be clear, my grandmother, to me, was incredibly loving and generous with hugs and money, because, of course, when you become a grandparent, I understand, it's so much easier to do that. You're not responsible anymore, so you can do this. So my mom did not work. She chose to be a stay-at-home mom. She taught me to bake and cook and sew. I was a horrible student at that, knitting, crocheting, and canning preserves. She loved music. She would sing, although none of us have been given that gift. We would sing around the house and dance around the house, and we weren't embarrassed at all of my mother, and we never went through a period of I hate you or anything. We loved, my mother was just a wonderful person. She passed 2 years ago, and people often said to me, your mother was just so nice, and I never heard anyone say anything bad about her, and I agree with that. And some would call her a saint, and I thought, well, yeah, she was married to my father for 48 years, so I can kind of understand that. But she also brought us to church, and she taught us to pray, something I've carried on with my children as well. And when we were old enough to stop saying, now I lay me down to sleep, and we prayed, we always started out with a thank you to God. We would thank God. And she drilled into us that if we were to thank God for all of the gifts and that bike under the Christmas tree and our friends and our family, that we also had to thank God for the challenges that he gave us. Because my mother believed that we were always being taught a lesson when these things happened, and it made us stronger because we were New Englanders, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And when I started coming to this church, when I was pregnant with my son Emmett, who is now teaching here at this church, I wanted to pass on to my kids a foundation of church as well. And it's one of the things that I can say I'm very happy that I chose to do for my kids, and I hope that they remember someday and appreciate it. Because I wanted them, if nothing else, to just be good people and be open about others. And when I started praying with them, I also taught them that we have to be thankful for all of the things in our life, including the challenges. So on my road and journey of motherhood, there are many things that we do that we think, oh, I hope I didn't screw that kid up, or is he going to be in therapy about this? And sometimes it's hard to know those things when you're a parent. And when challenges come, and recently my newest challenge of motherhood is that I am now a single mom after 21 years of being a mother. And that is a challenge for me, and it's very emotional. And I try very hard with my kids to keep things as normal as I can for them. And they're older. It would have been much harder if they were younger to be a single mom. And for those of you out there who do it, I applaud you, because it's a tough job. Motherhood's a tough job. And I think that when kids are little, it is really hard to be a parent. You're tired. Most of us work, they're up sick, and I can tell you honestly, let's just face the facts. When the kids need something, they're going to their mom. It is so rare to me that they ever went to their dad. And you're on all the time. But the rewards are so often, and they come every single day. They light up when you enter a room. They smush your face and tell you they love you and you're their girlfriend and they're going to marry you. Something, of course, they would never do now. And as they get older, it's easier to be a parent, I think. I don't worry about them falling down, or do I have to feed them, and all of those things. But the rewards are also fewer and far between that you can see, because I can tell you from experience, they do not like to dance with their mother, or especially when we're at a stoplight in a car, and they're totally embarrassed about that. And if you have teenagers, don't do that. They don't like it. But every once in a while, you see that glimmer of, it was okay. We're okay. He'll be okay. For instance, when your son is a senior in college and he texts you in the middle of finals week, getting ready for all of the festivities of commencement and final projects, and he says, hey, Mom, what are you doing on Sunday? And I write back and say, nothing. What can I do for you? Because I know he needs money, or he left his formal shoes at home, and I'm going to be driving to Providence to bring those back after church. But he doesn't, and he writes back and says, well, it's Mother's Day, and I want to take you to lunch and bring you to a movie of your choice. And I think, wow, I love Mother's Day. Thank you.